The world has already ended, several times in fact. The year 2000, Y2K, the computers were going to crash. 2012, the main calendar, remember that? And then just a few months back, some YouTube crazy decided the end of the world was in September, and thousands of people believed him. Spoiler, we're still here. And yet, every single time, Christians panic buy toilet roll and freeze-dried meals with faith thrown out the window. Here's the thing, prepping, it's not biblical. The bunker mentality, the hoarding, the I've got mine anxiety, that's not faith. That's fear with a storage unit. But there is something biblical we've almost completely lost. And if we don't recover it, we're in real trouble. Let's be honest about what modern prepping actually is. It's stockpiling products from the very systems you're afraid will fail. Freeze-dried meals, generators, tactical gear. You're not opting out. You're just buying yourself time before you're back to being dependent. And it's rooted in fear. Worst case thinking. Apocalyptic anxiety. What if everything collapses? Becomes the question that drives every decision. That's not wisdom. That's paranoia with a big budget. The Bible has a category for this. It's the rich fool in Luke 12 who builds bigger barns and says, "You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy." And God says, "You fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you." The issue isn't that he prepared, of course not. It's that he trusted his stockpile more than he trusted God. Prepping says, if I have enough stuff, I'll be safe. But scripture says, you're never safe apart from God. And all the beans and bullets in the world won't change that. So if prepping isn't the answer, what is? Here's the problem, the deeper issue. The modern West has outsourced almost everything that once made life human. We don't make or grow much anymore. We buy, we click, we depend. Our food comes from invisible supply chains. Our kids are shaped by systems we barely understand. And our health depends on industries that profit when we're sick. We've traded knowledge and community for convenience. And it's only when the system wobbles, a pandemic, a shortage, a crisis, that we remember how fragile we've become. And for most of history, life wasn't like that. The Bible assumes it wasn't. Its rhythms are agrarian, grounded in soil, in work, in community. The biblical calendar itself was built around harvest and rest, not around production quotas. Jesus' parables, well, they come from the world. Farmers, the shepherds, and the builders. People whose lives were connected to the land, to craft, and to one another. Proverbs 31 praises a woman who plants a vineyard. Paul urges believers to work with their hands so that they won't become dependent on anyone. Not because independence is the goal, but because participation is. Because when each household contributes, the community, it thrives. That's the economy Scripture imagines. Not stock markets, not GDP. Households and parishes managing resources, sharing skills, stewarding creation together. And that's the vision that we've lost. A people who don't just consume life from a distance, but build it with their hands, their neighbours, and their God. Now, before you roll your eyes, hear me out. The Amish, they're not prepping for collapse. They're just living in a way that doesn't assume the system will always function. And guess what? When the systems wobble, they barely notice. Pandemic hits, well, they're already growing food. They're already raising animals, working with their hands. They didn't panic buy because they didn't need to. That's not because they're paranoid. It's because they're awake. They've asked a question most of us never ask. What does this technology or system do to our community? And if the answer is weakens it, they don't adopt it. That's not anti-progress. That's wisdom. And here's the kicker. It's communal. Barn raisings, shared harvests, skills passed down generation to generation. Mutual aid when someone's struggling. That's what the early church had. Acts 2 says, no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. Now that's not communism, that's communion. That's what medieval parishes had. Everyone knew the baker, the blacksmith, the farmer. You depended on each other, not distant empires. And that's what we've traded for convenience and anonymity. Now, I'm not saying we all need to go full Amish, right? We know today that the Amish, they're a high control group, but we do need to recover the posture. Fear-based prepping asks, what if everything collapses? But wisdom-based resilience says, how do I live well, regardless? One is reactive and anxious, and the other, it's proactive and grounded. One is about survival, and the other, well, it's about flourishing. So what does this actually look like in practice? It doesn't mean that everybody quits their job and buys a farm, although that would be the ideal. Some of you should. We need more Christians working land instead of spreadsheets, but for most people, it starts smaller. Learn to grow some food. Even if it's just herbs on a windowsill or a few raised beds if you have room in the garden. Reconnect with where your food actually comes from. Properly. Learn to cook. Not just reheating things or ping in the microwave. Preserving, fermenting, baking bread. Skills our grandparents had that we've completely lost. Buy local where you can. Know who grows your food. Know who fixes your car. Know who builds your house. Invest in local economy, not just Amazon. You know your actual neighbours, not just online, the people on your street. The ones you'd need if things went sideways. Learn to fix things. Repair instead of replacing. Build instead of buy. We've become a culture of consumers who can't do anything with our hands. Live within the rhythms, seasons, Sabbath, work and rest. Not the 24/7 grind of industrial capitalism that's killing us and killing the planet. And here's the bit that'll make some of you uncomfortable. Reduce your dependency on systems that demand your compliance or compromise. If your livelihood depends entirely on institutions that hate what you believe, you're vulnerable. Not just economically, spiritually too. I'm not saying withdraw completely. I'm saying don't be naive about how fragile your position is. Now let's address the elephants in the room. Isn't this just for rich people? Land is expensive. Skills take time. Most people are paycheck to paycheck, right? Alright, fair point. But here's the thing. You can start small. A garden, it doesn't require a farm. Learning to cook doesn't require wealth. Building relationships with neighbours, well, that's free. And honestly, if we're serious about this, the church should be helping. And we are the church. Pooling resources, sharing land, teaching skills. That's what parishes used to do. So, aren't we romanticising the past? Well, absolutely, there's a danger of that. The past was brutal in ways that we forget, especially those of us who didn't live through it. Infant mortality was high. Medicine was primitive, and famines, as we know, happened. Although sometimes they were created. But we're not trying to recreate the 1800s. We're trying to recover wisdom that the 1800s had, that we've lost. That's the difference. And so what about mission, right? The Great Commission. Jesus sent disciples into towns and into cities. The Great Commission is outward facing. Does homesteading pull you inward? It can. That's a real danger. But it doesn't have to. Hospitality is mission. Sharing food you've grown, skills you've learned, and community that you've built. That's witness. People are starving for that. And here's the deeper point. Jesus and John the Baptist both said, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Not coming someday in the distance. At hand, it's now. This is the kingdom. Pressing in. We're meant to embody it now. Build it now. Live as though God's will is being done on earth as in heaven, and not just waiting for some rapture. What about the Eucharist? Now this one's important. The Lord's Supper, it's a shared bread and wine. Gifts received, not earned. It's communal. It's individual. It's grace, not works. This has to shape how we think about provision. We're not earning our salvation by growing tomatoes. We're stewarding gifts in gratitude, the gifts that God gave us. The Eucharist reminds us everything is grace. Even our labor is a gift. It's a gift to us and it's a gift from us. Our skills, even the land. So we work, yes. We steward, yes. But we receive it all as a gift first. So here's what I'm actually advocating for. Not bunkers, not isolation, not some doomsday fantasy where you're a lone survivor because you bought the right gear. I'm advocating for Christians to recover what we've lost. Households and parishes that know how to live, work and worship together. Communities that aren't completely at the mercy of distant powers to function. I'm advocating for resistance to empire, not through violence, but through building something better. Something that doesn't need the empire to survive. Israel was meant to be different from the surrounding nations. No king, jubilee economics every 50 years or so that power couldn't consolidate in the way that it has across the world. But they wanted a king, like the other nations. God said no, but they insisted. And what happened? It led to exile. And we're doing the same thing. We've handed over everything to a centralized power and wondered why we feel powerless. Agrarianism, it isn't nostalgia. It's resistance. It's saying, we don't need your system. We'll build our own, rooted in scripture, oriented towards God, structured around community. And yeah, intentional communities often fail because we're broken people. Hippie communes implode because they're built on utopian fantasies and vague vibes. But parishes built on confession, forgiveness, scripture and the Eucharist, well, they can last centuries. We need communities that know how to grow food and raise kids and fix things and forgive each other when it all goes sideways. Because anything we know about humans, it will go sideways. So here's my challenge. If you're a prepper, stop prepping for collapse. Start building for flourishing. Learn one skill this month. Plant something. Meet a neighbour. Cook a meal from scratch. And if you're further along, teach someone else. Share what you know. Be the person that someone else can depend on. Because the world might not end tomorrow, but the way we're living isn't sustainable, spiritually, economically, or ecologically. We can either keep outsourcing everything and hoping it holds together, or we can start building something real. If this landed, hit like and subscribe. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And if you want to support this kind of work, if you want to keep me honest and independent and keep putting up videos, well, you can check out my Patreon and you can support me there. The link's below in the description. Now, go outside, plant something, talk to your neighbour, fix something, or cook something. Your hands were made for more than scrolling. My name's Jacob, and this might be church.